This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Steadman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Doing great. I think today's going to be a big day for banter because, I always usually have one idea that I want to go off on. But today I've decided that there are actually four things I wanted to go off on or at least mention. So the first thing is our YouTube channel. Props to you because you've used technology to get all of our past episodes uploaded onto YouTube. And now YouTube must realize that I'm a fan of the show. I'm subscribed to the show. And it's letting me know about all these great past episodes that are out there on YouTube. So, for us, I think, props to you. But also I would say to all of our, regular listeners, please go out there and subscribe to our YouTube so more people can find it. And I think YouTube does a really good job of pushing content at people, right? I mean, that's kind of what Google's good at is knowing your preferences.
Yeah, you're in the algorithm somewhere. Somewhere you must watch a lot of identity stuff as an identity nerd like I am. But yeah, it's been the way it works is basically 3 per day. So we're not killing feeds and stuff like that. It'll catch up and then it'll become, one a week or so based on however often we record an episode. But that's it.
Yeah, I'd like to put the word out there also for, folks who are in the industry, maybe on the marketing side, use YouTube, get content out there. I worked with, I probably shouldn't name the vendor, but let's just call it a legacy IAM vendor. I worked pretty heavily with their technology 10 years ago. And I was meeting with a client earlier this week talking about that technology. I'm like, hey, let me brush up and go out there to the YouTube channel. And all the videos were uploaded 10 years ago. And these are the ones that was pushing me. I was like, man, that's really, really bad. So yeah, make that investment, folks.
Yeah, it's some content is timeless and some is not. It's probably the best way to say it.
Yeah, demos are not timeless. So topic number 2, Thanksgiving is, right upon us. It's a great time to get a break, especially from the road. I mean, this is probably going to be the first week you haven't traveled in months. Mm-hmm. Maybe the only week you don't travel until, Christmas time, right?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm recording right now from a hotel room in Minneapolis area, and the Wi-Fi sucks. So I'm hopeful that this comes through okay. So far, so good. We'll see how it lasts. But yeah, I think this is my either 12th or 13th week, I think, on the road going somewhere. Got a break next week for Thanksgiving. So today's November 14th as we're recording this. And then, let's see. And then, yeah, I'm going to New York City for December 1st event that we're going to talk about here in a second.
Yeah. So that's going to be something that's also on my list. But number 3, so a client mentioned to me today, hey, I found that you do a podcast and I've been listening to podcasts. And that's awesome to hear. Of course, new people are finding the podcast all the time. And that's why we spend such a large amount of our effort focused on, getting the word out there or making sure that we show up in all the algorithms, and because there's new people looking for this type of content all the time. So please go out there, and I don't want to shill for, likes and subscribes and all that, but that's unfortunately or fortunately, that's how it works.
Hit that button.
Smash that like button. Yeah, terrible. But also, I talked to this client today and I mentioned, we're going to have Matt on the show. We're recording with him later today. And he's one of those big brains in the industry. And because this person is not necessarily directly in our industry, he didn't know Matt. Matt does a great job of, getting his name out there. But I said, look, he's going to be a fantastic guest. Make sure you, listen to this episode. So I think this episode is going to be one of those really good ones. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was just, one of the things, I've got a lot of gratitude in my mind for, the company we work for, RSM, sending us to all the conferences over the past year, because I realized like I'll be talking to clients and bringing up things from a conference perspective and like what's hot and like what, really when you go to these conferences, you're being exposed to the cutting edge and you're being exposed to what's happening in the industry, what's happening next. And when you talk about those things and folks who aren't on the IAM conference circuit, they're not aware of those things sometimes. So, it's a major benefit to be able to go to those conferences and play a part and hear those things more than one time a year, because that's really where our industry's heading.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good time to, learn more what the industry's doing. I think, I spent the first 12 years of my career in identity, working for 2 companies, and you'll really learn how identity works at the company that you're at. And going to conferences is a great way to see how other people are doing it and try to get those ideas and, stay current. I think that's the challenge that most organizations have, is staying even just current with where things are at. There's a lot of legacy thinking still out there. I still see a lot of, we change our passwords every 90 days. Okay, well, that was cool like 4 years ago. Hasn't been a standard or even recommended by like NIST for the last like 3 or 4 years, I think it is. So, but there's still a lot of people just haven't gotten that word out there. So definitely a good way to like learn stuff. And I think that's a good segue into where I'm going to be on December 1st. Is it okay if I bring that up?
Yeah, go for it, man. I'm through my list now. Those are my random topics of the day.
All right. So I'm going to be in New York City on December 1st. Identiverse is hosting regional events this December in New York and Chicago. If you're not familiar with Identiverse, it's one of the best identity conferences of the year. And what they've started to do is these smaller kind of regional events. So hopefully, if you're in New York, you'll see me, walking around the whatever the venue is. I have not been to one of these before, so I'm interested to see how it kind of turns out. But it'll be Friday, December 1st in New York, and then there's another one in Chicago that I will not be at. So you can like just join yourselves, I guess, on Tuesday, December 5th. So they have kind of things coming back up right around the time. I started looking at the speakers list. So like Andy Hindle is going to be there, who's been on the show a couple times. They got some other cool folks who are going to be there. So it seems like kind of a cool little thing. And the best part is that it's actually free. So it's a free conference. It's in New York City. It's in Chicago. Space is pretty limited, though, so you want to make sure you get registered. And we, of course, have a link that we can share with folks. It's a bit.ly link, which I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of because you never know what's behind the bit.ly link. But I don't know if this, I assure you there's nothing nefarious back there, but I'll just take my word for it. But it's bit.ly/IDVR23-IDAC. I know it just rolls right off the tongue. So I'll have a link in our show notes so people can kind of check that out. It includes breakfast, so score there. And for people who are scrambling at the last minute for any like CPE credits, you actually get 3 credits for attending. So pretty cool option there for people who are interested. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to New York, but I'm going to try to get out there for the first.
The saying goes, there's no such thing as a free lunch, but apparently there is no such thing as a free breakfast.
I think it makes more sense for local people because I started to book hotels today and oh my gosh, they are crazy right now. So fortunately, I have a couple of client meetings and things like that to kind of tie it all together. But the money that you save on your registration maybe goes towards, I don't know, cab, train, air, hotel fare, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think there's 2 benefits. One is the benefit you get yourself, but also if you're in the area, like support this kind of thing. I think it's great that Identiverse is reaching out and starting to do regional events, and I hope there are more of them in the future. If this happens and they get a very poor turnout, they're less likely to do it again in the future, and I think that would be a shame.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think, I like Identiverse. I think it's one of my favorite. I think it's the best or one of the best identity conferences in the U.S. at least. And I'm not aware of them doing this in the past. And we kind of found out about this kind of late in the game. We're only a couple of weeks early since, till the first one. So I don't know if it was proven before because I hadn't heard of it until a couple days ago, I think, when, they reached out, asking if we'd help get the word out. So I'm curious to see what kind of environment it'll be and kind of who shows up and kind of things like that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it goes. I'm sure it'll go well. Like the speaker list is great. The people who are presenting are all good speakers and usually have pretty good content. So I'm not concerned about the content. I think it's more right now just kind of awareness is probably the struggle. Like anything, right? People are still discovering identity and this podcast and other things like that. Okay, why don't we turn to our guest, because you kind of teased him already. Let me introduce Matt Caulfield. He's the founder and CEO of Oort, which is now a part of Cisco. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you, Jeff. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. And I feel like we've seen each other at a couple conferences earlier this year, and it's like, hey, glad to finally get this conversation going. One of the first things we do when we have someone on for the first time is kind of talk about identity backgrounds and how people got into the space. How did you get into identity? Is it something that you chose, or did it choose you?
I kind of fell backwards into identity. I'm a networking guy. That's my background. Networking, distributed systems, cloud, virtual networking. I started Oort in order to solve this problem of distributed access. And when we started talking to chief security officers about how they secure remote access and actually accomplish zero trust, everything kept pointing back to identity as the linchpin, as the foundation. And it turns out like getting packets to the front door of an application or a resource is a lot easier than this big hairy problem, which is identity. And so me as an entrepreneur and my co-founder Didi, we gravitate towards these big audacious problems that we need to solve. And I suddenly transformed over the course of the past few years from a networking person to the identity guy.
How much does that networking background help you on the identity side?
I think it gives me an outside perspective. Like I see identity today as where networking was maybe 20 or 30 years ago, where there's a realization that, oh, shoot, if someone gets into your network, you're screwed as a business. Mm-hmm. And now we're having the same conversation all over again, except we don't have all the tools that networking has built up over the past 20 years, or all of the discipline and regimented concepts of like network topology and network architects like we do in networking, where there's like this plethora of training around it. I think people now are realizing like, no, this is like a true discipline in the enterprise world, and we need to give it just as much, if not more attention in terms of identity security as we've put into network security.
Amen.
Yeah, preach on, brother.
This is an easy crowd.
Yeah, you're talking to a very friendly audience of this. I imagine people listening to, are in this space, right? They're come from all walks of life, and I think it's sometimes easy to draw the parallel. Like I can see the direct connection, right, between like networking and identity. But sometimes there's backgrounds we come across. It's like, oh, I didn't really kind of think about that. I mean, customer service, waiting tables, bartending. I have a lot of background in that. That a lot of that goes to program management and making sure we understand, psychologies of people and things like that. So it's very cool to kind of hear those backgrounds. I'm very curious about the Oort name, because the Oort cloud is theorized to be a vast cloud of icy planetesimals surrounding the sun. The concept of such a cloud was proposed in 1950 by the Dutch astronomer Jan Oort, and that's why this is named after that. He proposed that the bodies in this cloud sort of replenish and keep constant the number of comets that are entering this inner solar system, where they get eventually consumed and destroyed by the sun. So that's me being very clever and pulling things from Wikipedia. I'm not that smart normally. How did the name Oort come about? Is there any relation to there, or is it something different?
That level of detail we have not gone into. We've gotten all kinds of questions on the name, like how do you pronounce it? Is it an acronym for something? But no, you are 100% correct. We are named after the Oort cloud, which is in turn named after Jan van Oort, a Dutch astronomer. He's a pretty interesting guy, reading about him and the things that he accomplished and discovered. But the reason why we're named Oort and after the Oort cloud is because you can think of that Oort cloud of these kind of comets and asteroids and tiny planets orbiting the solar system in the same way you think about all of the identities that orbit the typical enterprise organization, and the fact that if you knock any single one of those identities off course, you can send it hurtling on a collision course with the inner solar system, with your data and your applications and the rest of your user base. Like, that's where that analogy comes from.
I wonder if Jan Oort thought that, however many years, 50 years later, there would be a company named after him around identity. I feel like this is a question we should always ask, any of the technology vendors they have. Like, I'm always fascinated to hear like where names come from the company perspective. And you guys got acquired by Cisco. Can you describe your role at Cisco? And how has your, day-to-day changed with that transition?
Yeah, so Cisco's an incredible acquirer. They've done over 250 acquisitions. They know what they're doing, and we're really happy with the outcome to be part of Cisco. My role has evolved from being founder and CEO of Oort, which is sort of an all-encompassing role where I need to worry about setting the vision and hiring the team and not running out of cash and pursuing investors, to being enabled to just get focused on where the market and identity is going. And the reason for Cisco acquiring Oort is the same reason that I fell into identity in the first place, which is that there's a realization that identity is the new perimeter, but it's a horrible perimeter. It's not even chain link fence. I was talking to one of the executives at the security group here, and it's like, yeah, identity as a perimeter today is like a string of rose petals across a lawn. That's where we're at today in terms of defending the identity perimeter. And Cisco, as a security company and as a networking company, realizes that they have a pretty important role in the market to bring together an identity story that works with security and that works with networking. It's like, that's the reason for the acquisition. And my role within Cisco now as a VP of product within the security business group is to help realize that identity first security vision inside of Cisco and help bring that power to our customers.
And Matt, I started off in the call calling you one of the big brains, and I not to make your head big or anything, but we were prepping for the show, and obviously knowing that the background of Oort was a ITDR play, if you will, and so my mind was tuned to, let's talk about ITDR, and I do want to talk about ITDR because I still think it's one of the biggest advancements in the past 5 years in our space. But I want to talk about all these other subjects as well. But maybe we just do start with ITDR. Can you, before you kind of go deep, just stay real shallow and give us what is ITDR? And is it the same thing for everybody, right? But what is ITDR? And then why do you think it's going to be, like, what was your mentality that, like, this is what we're going to focus on because this is the game changer?
Yes. So ITDR is near and dear to my heart as an acronym just because we built our business around it. That was the wedge that we used to become successful in the market. That's a lot of the reason why a company like Cisco invested in us and eventually acquired the company, was because of all this momentum about this 4-letter acronym. ITDR to me is like one piece of the identity security puzzle. And so I usually start top down. So I appreciate you saying the big brain comment. I don't know if that's good or not. But I think in terms of like top down first principles, we need to build an identity security pillar in enterprise security just as much as we have email security, network security, device security, endpoint security. We need an identity security pillar. And what is that pillar made up of? There are 3 kind of sub-pillars. I often say legs of the stool in identity security. And I'll get to ITDR. I'm not forgetting that. The first leg, though, is just the identity attack surface, discovery, the ability to see what are your identities, what do they have access to, what are they doing with that access. That visibility is the first leg of the stool. The second leg of the stool is this other new acronym that a few startups are talking about that nobody's quite claimed yet, which is identity security posture management. This idea that, and there's everything is security posture management. You had data, cloud, whatever. Now we have identity security posture management. That's the second leg. That's more of the proactive part of finding vulnerable identities and fixing them. And then the third leg of the stool, which is sort of a catch-all, if you don't have great visibility and you don't have great kind of posture management for your identities, at the very least, you can do identity threat detection and response, ITDR. And the reason for that is even if things get through, you can catch them by looking for specific patterns. And so the reason why ITDR is popular is a few reasons. One is because UEBA got sort of a bad name for itself over the past few years as being a very noisy way to detect user anomalies. Like, that's one reason. The other reason is that with the pandemic and everybody moving to working from home, suddenly this phrase, identity is the new perimeter, became a reality overnight. And then the third is that there were a slew of acquisitions last year with Ativo, for example, and Preempt before that kind of kicked off this new wave of identity threat detection that caused Gartner, again, last year, I think around February or March, to say that ITDR, identity threat detection and response, would be one of the major security trends in 2022 and now in 2023. So that's kind of all the background. The reason why we got into it was actually from the posture angle. We started with, hey, how do we help our customers detect inactive accounts? Remember, I got into this from zero trust networking. So how do we help a customer become zero trust ready? It's by cleaning up their vulnerable identities so that when somebody authenticates, they can trust that that identity is truly who they say they are, and you can get the policy to do zero trust from there. We evolved from posture management into ITDR at the same time that ITDR was taking off as a category. And it just, for whatever reason, is a way more interesting starting use case for security teams than the posture management thing. Posture management is hygiene. It's like brushing your teeth. It's not that exciting. The ITDR piece is really what gets people excited. It's looking at attackers. It's looking at their patterns in a way that we haven't before.
So I'm really glad that you brought up the UEBA kind of, to use that Gartner term, the trough of disillusionment, because it felt like, oh, this is potential. And like when Jeff and I thought about identity at the center, UEBA was a big part of that picture, where it's like it's going to detect the anomalies, and then I don't know. So to me, that was where the UEBA, the disillusionment was, and then it's going to what? Throw it on a dashboard. But I feel like you tied the lineage of ITDR back to UEBA, but the ITDR, the R is very important, right? The R is like, now we can answer that question. What are we going to do? Or at least we have a way to configure it to do something, because to me, it's like, oh, now we spotted some anomaly. Now we can disable an account, kill off a session, things like that.
That's a really important observation. UEBA, user endpoint, behavior analytics. I guess if you're doing analytics, like, so what? Like, what are you going to do with that? Just stare at a dashboard all day, to your point. ITDR kind of builds in this concept of both the detection and the response. And that's something that at Oort we got really good at, was doing the combination of high fidelity detections that were not noisy and really clear recommended response actions, including actions like quarantining an account, killing active sessions, opening tickets. Things like this become really natural once you have that R in the ITDR.
Yeah, the R is so important. I kind of feel like at the core of identity is about trust, right? And if you have somebody coming in and they can present the credentials and you let them in, it's missing an element, or the trust gets destroyed when someone can do that or some machine can do that, and there's nothing realizing like, okay, this is a machine. So to keep things simple, I kind of think of the ITDR, especially around authentication systems, because I think that use case just makes sense to people. In other words, oh, I have a headless browser coming in, or I have something where it's like the IP address just changed, or something that is like a very clear indicator. The reason I also think about that use case is I was just at the Okta conference, and I've talked about this on the podcast quite a few times. This is something that Okta said, oh, well, we're going to, right now they have threat insights, and they're moving to identity threat protection. It's going to be a new feature. And they, as much as made the statement, you will not need an additional ITDR system. Our system is going to have it built in. So is that what we're going to see more and more, or is there still that use case out there that people should be investing in ITDR?
It's a great question. So first off, yes, authentication systems are a really good choke point to do detection and response. Like 100%, it's kind of like the gateway, the network gateway, to use that analogy 20 to 30 years ago, is like a good place to put your firewall because all the traffic's going through it. Now that perimeter is the identity. And so putting ITDR around the authentication, looking at the telemetry, makes a whole lot of sense. Now, will the IAM platform providers like Okta and Microsoft just make ITDR a feature of the platform? I think they need table stakes capabilities to check that box, and that's really important. And we have a great relationship with the teams at Microsoft and at Okta, and we respect them a lot. I don't think that security teams are going to necessarily trust those vendors to secure themselves 100% of the time. So you might buy an Apple MacBook, you might buy a Lenovo Windows machine, and you might trust to some extent, like Windows Defender, maybe for a small business up until a certain point, but a lot of companies will go and invest in CrowdStrike to have something else that's looking at these different systems and just getting a different view into whether there are endpoint problems, threats. Same thing is true in identity, where you might invest in a whole slew of different identity tools in your architecture. You might have like Workday, where identities are born, and then SailPoint copying them into Active Directory. And then from there, they're picked up by your SSO system, like in Okta. No single IAM system has really become that top of stack. And that's where ITDR, a good ITDR solution, can really help beyond the built-in capabilities that like Microsoft's risky users feature might have, beyond what Okta might be doing with threat detection. A good ITDR can take all of those risk signals and create a kind of a lower noise, truer or higher fidelity signal out of them, so you have a lower rate of false positives.
And so as we were preparing for this episode, going beyond ITDR, you started to bring up some of the areas that, you feel are like, these are the main things digital identity industry, that the industry needs to solve. You brought up one that hasn't been on the tip of my tongue anyway. So it was data plane side of identity, the data plane side of identity. So explain for us what that is.
Yeah, so again, my network background is kind of leaking into how I think about identity. So in the networking world, we think about the data plane, the control plane, the management plane, the analytics plane, or policy plane. Like these planes of existence loosely tie into this idea that everything is just layers, like the OSI model and the TCP/IP stack. So when I say data plane of identity, what I'm really referring to is the actual protocols that make authentication and authorization work. I think there's a realization right now that the lack of kind of continuous trusted access and the lack of continuous access evaluation is leading to this whole new pedigree of threats around session hijacking, and a whole lot of ways to pull that off, where we need to start rethinking how that data plane, the fundamentals of those protocols, are actually implemented to support more of a continuous trust model rather than a one-time authentication model.
Two things you said there really trigger me, which is the session hijacking, which is very real, right? I mean, we've seen in the news very recently, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And the continuous, which I think kind of like, that champions the ITDR, because a hijack session should be something that you pick up that, hey, the device that started the session is no longer the device that's trying to use the session. That should be a major red flag and immediately cause some kind of re-authentication. And then the continuous authentication. And I just feel like we need a grounding of everybody agreeing on what's the definition of continuous authentication. So I've seen some really cool technologies where like you go up to a computer when somebody leaves the room and your keystroke cadence kind of like the system realizes that's not the same person. Or if you look at like the Imprivata solution with the prox cards, log in, log out based on your proximity. I mean, that's certainly continuous authentication. And then there's kind of like the risk-based authentication. You're moving from, one risk level to another, or you're increasing your own risk, and therefore you're triggering a re-authentication. So it's more of a simplistic model, but is that really both continuous authentication? Because they're quite different, right?
So I think that one model that makes sense to mitigate this risk of session hijacking is the first thing you describe, which is, all right, if we're not going to fix it at the data plane layer, let's fix it at the analytics layer by using ITDR to detect when we see a session being used from two places, two devices at the same time, and then using that to trigger some action, whether that's quarantining the user or just killing all their active sessions so they're forced to re-authenticate. I think that is a good catch-all solution, because no matter how many features we add to the underlying protocols, to the data plane, there's always going to be some new novel way that someone will get around them. So having a catch-all like an ITDR that can find and fix problems is important. Now that, to me, is a Band-Aid. I think we need to fix the underlying protocols themselves to not just, continuous authentication kind of implies that you still have this concept of a session. We really need to stitch this whole thing end to end from authentication into the backend application and how it manages sessions in order to be successful. Because if we're continuously authenticating, but whatever Slack or your email client is just continuing to use long-lived session tokens, it doesn't really do much good. The whole thing needs to work together.
Absolutely. So the next topic you brought up, which really resonated with me, was around machine identity. You kind of talk about where your brain is in terms of machine identity.
So honestly, I'm trying to wrap my head around this space. Machine identity is a bit of an enigma to me. So I break it down into the device identity and workload identity. Those to me are kind of this two subcategories within the taxonomy here. And device identity has become pretty clear, like how we handle device authentication. If that device is tied to a user, we know how to use hardware modules, TPMs, et cetera, to develop device trust and to work that into how the user is authenticated tied to a device. I'm not saying that most organizations have successfully rolled that out. I think there's a lot of work to do to operationalize that in most environments, but I think the solutions are pretty well known there. Where it gets murky for me is more on the workload identity side of the world, how we manage the identity of processes and containers and virtual machines and servers and Lambda functions and all these fun things, is whether or not there's really a need to centralize IAM for those types of identities, like we've centralized identity for humans and devices. Is it necessary in the workload world? Is there actually a buyer for a solution like that? Or is it really just the domain of developers and the CTO to manage workload identities? And I don't know, the chief security officer and the security team offload it to them and make it part of their security development lifecycle. That to me is murky, but I do see a slew of startups in this space starting to tackle machine identity and managing workload identity. That means there might be something there. There's good validation when you see multiple companies going after something that there might be a problem to solve. And I have no doubt there's a problem to solve. The only question in my mind is whether there's going to be a big successful unicorn of a machine identity company 5 years from now. I don't know.
So many ideas here. First off, you're taking on a problem that has not been solved. The problem is there, and I can tell you that every organization tries to deal with it. the management of human identities has been solved. That doesn't mean everybody's doing it perfectly or anything like that, but we get the feed from an authoritative source. You have good governance around who works here with those authoritative sources, and then you map identities to accounts. But the problem is you look at the Active Directory. Almost everybody has an Active Directory, and there's way more accounts than there are people. What the heck is going on? Well, there's all these machine accounts. And then there's all these machine accounts in all the other places in your network. And by the way, I want to draw the difference between an account and an identity. They're not one and the same. So that's what I think, as much as we talk about machine identities, like if we have 50,000 machine identity accounts, that doesn't mean we have 50,000 machine identities. That's my perspective. Now, what does that really mean? I don't think this has been solved, but I do think that the answer is that these are very difficult for humans to manage. I think there's going to be some element of artificial intelligence that's going to be required for the management of the identities. But ultimately, the machines have to be drawn back to a human, and the AI has to be able to inform the human on how the account is being used. The identity is the human. This is what I mean. There is a machine, and it uses a bunch of accounts. I just don't know if there really is a machine identity per se.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think my
so the problem
co-founder
is
and
not
CTO.
solved, so you're brave.
I'm not saying I'm tackling that one. I just think it's interesting. I think it's white space in the market. But my co-founder and CTO, Didi, would totally agree with you that and I think I agree at this point, every machine identity needs to eventually somehow be tied back to dotted line into a real human being who is responsible for it, or a team that's responsible for it. So if something goes wrong, you have someone to reach out to, someone who can actually take action to do something with these identities. I think we've been in so many customer environments where service accounts outnumber human identities. It's not uncommon. And it's also not uncommon to, like you said, have many accounts that are tied back to a single identity, even for humans. We find that a single human can have 5 different accounts for different purposes within an organization. One of the challenges that we solve with Oort is linking those all together so you can think of them as one user with one identity, just instantiated multiple times, but actually bring all that together in one place. It's a hard problem to solve, but a very necessary problem to solve.
I don't know if I agree. I'm going to take the contrarian view because I think you guys had me until we started talking about mapping a machine identity back to a human and having that person somehow claim ownership over an account. I don't know if that is actually viable. I think there's a definition between responsible for making changes versus truly ownership over an account, which I think is, maybe I'm not hearing it correctly, but I don't know if I agree with the mapping of it back to a human. I can think of plenty of use cases where there's just so many of these little micro service accounts, machine accounts, and trying to map those back to humans, every single one.
How dare you? How dare you disagree with us, Jeff?
So I think about application owners, and every single application in most enterprise organizations goes back to somebody in IT or a group within IT who's responsible for that application. I got to think that identity, we need at least somebody to pin these things on. I agree that it's not an easy problem, and there are usually so many of these identities that it's hard to imagine doing it manually. But I think that there is a AI-driven option here where we can get some level of assignment, some sort of racy matrix for those machine identities.
Yeah, and the way I think about it, I do want to be clear that I don't think it should be a hard tie. Hey, I've got a Active Directory ID. I've got a admin Active Directory ID. Maybe I've got a couple more. And then when I leave the organization, you shut those off. That's the problem with these machine identities and why they proliferate, is because you can't do that. It doesn't, that's not sensical. But I think of it more like when you have one of the problems, which is very common, is group proliferation. So you might have an organization where they've got 50,000 employees and 200,000 groups. And they say, this is out of control. We need to clean this up. First step is like set up an evergreen process so the problem stops getting worse. Then you go through and you start to clean up the groups, and groups that are legitimate and need to continue on, you need to collect metadata. And one of those metadata is who's the owner of that group, because they are the human who is going to say, yes, this list of people and the access that we have assigned to this group, the access control list or whatever, is legitimate. And that's really where I say it has to be tied back to human. The problem is like if you have one person who now has 10,000 machine identities tied back to them, well, how do they really process whether or not that's correct? And to me, that's that AI element.
Well, I think that's where I'm struggling with this, trying to get back to a single human. I think it makes more sense to map it to a department or a team or something like that, because I think it's a fool's errand to try and say, hey, these anywhere from 1 to 7,000 machine accounts map back to Jeff. Well, what happens if Jeff leaves? Because we all know, everything's perfect in identity world and everything always works. When people leave the organization, it's not like something bad will happen to those accounts through automation, right? So I get concerned about trying to figure out that mapping. I think it makes more sense to send it to, even if it's not mapped to a human, but mapped to a headless account, so to speak, that is, owned and operated by a team, maybe infrastructure, maybe it's marketing or some other application development team, that kind of thing makes more sense to me.
Yeah, ownership. Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of went down the path a little bit talking about this next topic. This was kind of the last topic we'll hit on, which is, you called it entitlement entropy. What is entitlement entropy?
I'm reusing the space analogies here because there's entropy in outer space, like things are constantly moving apart. So entitlement entropy, and I'm sticking with that term, is a really important concept in identity where entitlements are always added but never really taken away, maybe in small batches. But over time, entitlement entropy increases in any given organization. The number of groups, the number of identities, the permissions that group membership or entitlements that those bestow upon the members, it's ever increasing. And so if you look at a graph of the number of entitlements in an organization, it's sort of exponential as that organization ages, as they add more applications and more users and more devices, the amount of things that collectively the population has access to just goes up. And that is a huge problem in identity that's age old and doesn't have a good solution today. It's like, how do you rein in entitlement entropy? How do you prune those entitlements in a way that you don't slow down the growth of that organization that relies on the ability to access the resources that they need, while at the same time reducing and maintaining a blast radius for each individual that's reasonable, so that if their account is taken over, you don't have to worry about them having access to thousands of systems. Maybe it's limited to a handful that you can actually go through each one and see what damage was done, not access to 2,000 different things where you could never actually go and do the instant response that was necessary to clean up all the damage that could have been caused.
Yeah, this term entitlement entropy, I think of like entitlement chaos. I think of it in two perspectives. One is, what is the total basket, the total universe of entitlements? And this is one of my rabbit holes, right? So I went down the rabbit hole on YouTube for the universe. And it's like, only 100 years ago, humanity thought the universe was the Milky Way. Well, then what they've realized using the Hubble telescope and everything is that there are billions of universes, which each universe is made up of a billion stars. We actually don't know how big the universe is. And we don't know, what's outside of the universe. I feel like sometimes for folks in our industry who are trying to wrap their brain around the entitlements. It's like there are so many hundreds of thousands of entitlements. The good thing is usually the areas where entitlement chaos lives, that I find anyway, number one in the Active Directory, the number of groups. And maybe that's a big part of because, well, first, Active Directory has been around for over 20 years. I remember when I got my first MCSD certification in Windows 2000, it was the first version of Active Directory. But so some of the groups are, I mean, some organizations still have some of those groups that were created way back when. But I also think that because Active Directory becomes the IDP for so many other applications, it becomes the centralization, the dumping ground for all these groups. The other area that I find is ERP systems. And because ERP systems are, we define all these nice, neat groups, and if organizations get into the habit of everybody gets ad hoc access, everybody's a snowflake in terms of that, their uniqueness and their access profile. So then the reality of it is, even though you have roles, it's like those roles really don't tell the whole story. So there's the universe of entitlement entropy, but then there's also like the individual's entitlement entropy. Are people over provisioned? What are we doing about that? And I kind of feel like in the cloud space, there's at least a solution out there that's trying to take it on, which is the idea around CIEM systems, where you can actually go into, here's the beauty is like, okay, you go ahead and put most of your eggs in a couple or just one cloud infrastructure or platform as a service, right? So it puts all of its logs in one place and you can see what entitlements are actually being invoked. And then you map that back to the person, say, or to the account and say, here's accounts that have access that they are not using over X number of days. In the enterprise, we generally don't have the confidence to say, I'm going to go through an account and just start deleting the entitlements these people don't need, because they obviously don't need them. They haven't used them in the last year. Well, do you really have the logs to show you that? And almost every single organization I've ever worked with, the answer to that is no, not really. Mm-hmm. That's the problem.
I think the solution here is that you can be confident about removing entitlements if you have an easy way to get them back. And so that is kind of the crux of being able to reduce entitlement entropy and have the confidence to prune that graph of entitlements. Kind of relies on making sure that you also have workflows in place that make it super simple and have just enough friction for people to get them back, but not too much friction. Whether that's having some of these newer just-in-time access tools that work in Slack or that have nice UIs where you can easily request access to an application or a resource when you need it for a specific time range, whether it's like a next-gen PAM or a next-gen IGA solution. I think there are a lot of companies, especially on the smaller side, trying to tackle that side of it. And so I think we need to do both. We need to find a way to remove these unused entitlements while also finding a really smart way to give them back when they're needed and when they're warranted.
That's a great point. I also think, the discussion we get into on this podcast a lot is like, okay, what's AI going to do for identity? And when I hear things like it's going to do an analysis of you have these entitlements, other people in your department have these entitlements, you should request this entitlement. I'm like, that is garbage, dude. That's not intelligence. That's business analytics. I'm sorry. Now, if you were able to answer much more difficult questions or give much more insightful advice like, hey, these people that work for you, now you're going to recertify them. John Doe has these accesses that he hasn't used in over 2 years. I at least now have to have a conversation with John Doe and say, like, do you really need this? You haven't used it in 2 years. But in order to do that, you have to have a certain confidence level that you're going to have the logs. So the reason we haven't gotten the logs all centralized is like that's hard work. What if AI could actually do that hard work for you, get those logs, start making sense of them, crunching that big data? Now you've done something that's, changes the game.
I think we're just now at a point where some of this is possible, where those logs are actually exposed via APIs that are useful by a lot of these IAM platforms, where you can have tools that ingest them and analyze them at scale. And I think, like you're saying, that's a great use of AI, is interpreting that graph and helping communicate it to the managers and the end users to help them understand what the system is doing and how it might change. I think this whole thing in identity, unlike endpoint security, network security, where you're dealing with bits and bytes, it's human. A lot of it is human. And so communicating with humans, what I've seen in the LLM space and with ChatGPT, I think is also very promising, because it means that we now maybe have a more programmatic interface that we can use to communicate with humans in a way that they'll understand, so they can more naturally interface with these complex problems that identity presents.
Well, I think you hit on something there that I find important in this age of AI that we're starting to get into, is the interface and people being able to not only get the information out, but they don't have to be, technical wizards. They don't have to write SSIS reports, right? Things like that to get data out. I'm looking forward to the day when we're like Star Trek and we just ask a question in a natural language and the computer just kind of figures it out and gives you the answer. It kind of interprets what it is you're really asking for. I think that'll be real interesting.
It's not that far away. Yeah. I think we've collected a lot of the data.
Yeah, I think we're getting pretty close. I want to ask one more question, and I want to kind of tap into your entrepreneurial kind of startup, thread that you've got going throughout. If you were to build another digital identity company, where would you start? Would it be something along the lines of starting with like identity governance? Would it be something authentication based or privileged access or something else? Like, where do you see a need right now?
It's a great question. I think we hit kind of magical timing with ITDR when we built Oort. And there's the big secret in venture capital is, team, tech, and timing. And you need all three of them. And so you couldn't recreate that magic again if we tried to do it today in November 2023. I wouldn't start an ITDR company. As much as I like ITDR, I think that the market is not saturated, but there's a lot of good ITDR startups. A lot of the big companies now have solid ITDR capabilities. There are other areas that really need attention that an entrepreneur could use as a beachhead into the identity market. IGA is interesting. I think that is a really hairy problem, especially if you're trying to tackle SailPoint with their massive library of integrations and their network of people who build those integrations. They just have a massive moat. And so I think some of these workflows like just-in-time access are interesting. But again, that's a fairly busy market at this point. That's been around just as long as ITDR as an area of interest. I think machine identity, it's a very fragmented space. And so I think a company could launch in machine identity, but might not get to escape velocity because of how fragmented it is. The area that I think is hottest right now is really SIAM, so consumer IAM and all the tooling around it, like authorization. This is an area where, again, we do see a lot of companies, but the market is just massive and still growing. And there's such amazing innovation going on in consumer IAM that I think if I were to start something, that's where I would focus. It's still a very much unsolved problem and a very big untapped market that there's no clear winner. We had Auth0, and Auth0 is still a huge name in that market, but I think it's time for sort of a next gen Auth0 to take the reins in CIAM.
Yeah, it's interesting to bring up Auth0. I mean, they got purchased by Okta, a few years back now. I think the closest probably competitor to them is maybe something like ForgeRock that has a lot of APIs, but that's been purchased by Ping, which it seems maybe they're on similar trajectories between like Okta and Ping, sort of having API-based ways to do authentication or authorization, because I think you're right. CIM has a lot of typically more of a build it mindset versus a buy it mindset.
Right.
And you're really just kind of trying to get the infrastructure in place. I want to tap into, again, that entrepreneurial spirit to end on a lighter note, something not IT related. If you could start a business related to something with outdoor adventures, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. So as we talked about when we prepared this show, I love being out in nature. I live in the middle of the woods. We're surrounded by trees and lots of land, and it's really nice to get out and just walk around, or take a drive and go for a hike in the wilderness here in Massachusetts. It's one of the most reforested states in the country. It's something I've learned. It used to be all farmland up until the late 1800s. Anyway, what would I do with outdoor adventure? To me, it's really important to combine mental health and nature. And I think like an app of some kind, maybe it would be nonprofit, because I don't know how you would monetize this, but something that combines that idea that you should probably take a half-hour walk every day out in nature to rejuvenate yourself, maybe with some kind of talk track or just simply a reminder to go and do that and why it's important, is something that I could get behind.
There truly is an app for everything at this point, right?
Why not?
Jim, what about yourself? What would you start a business on that had a relation to outdoor adventures?
I'm gonna feed off of Matt's a little bit, because it's an app. It's actually a marketplace. A marketplace would be a business like Airbnb or Uber. And my marketplace would connect people who have outdoor themed rental vacations available, and people could go and rent them. So it could be, I've got a VW bus that, you can just fly out to Oregon and stay in this VW bus for a week. Or I've got something in Alaska and you can come in, but it would be focused on that. So it'd be kind of like Airbnb, but it would be more focused for the adventure outdoor type. And I also think that, I've rented things from Airbnb before, and I don't want to disparage Airbnb, but man, it's one thing when you go in and you see, I'd like to rent this place, and it's $200 a night, and 3 nights, it should be around $600, and then it's like $850 because of all the fees that get tacked on. It's kind of like, it's also like, buying tickets to events, all the fees that get thrown on, and I'd want to keep the fees more reasonable, because I think they push people away. And it feels like kind of like false advertising. So I think that's what I would do. I'd create a marketplace for outdoor adventures. What about you, Jeff?
I think Airbnb is trying to get a handle on the fees, but you're totally right. It's like a $500 cleaning fee. I'm like, what? That's crazy. But that being said, what if you were, renting I feel like what you described, Jim, was like unique locations to like stay in around the world. It's like, okay, I want to stay in like a crashed airplane in the middle of the Amazon, something like that. Is that kind of like along the theme of what you're thinking?
Oh, that would be great. And so, yeah, the difference, that one was crashed airplane in the Amazon, we took all the bodies out and we just.
No, that's the cleaning fee.
Yeah, that's the cleaning fee. That's what you get for the cleaning fee. No, but I think the other thing is like, let's just say you were going on a business trip or to a conference or something, and you wanted to stay like in the beach or something and stay in that like camper or something like that. But you don't want to pack a stove. You don't want to pack a bunch of food. You just want to show up, have everything set up for you, and basically already have your s'mores there and just start camping. And especially if you're only camping for a weekend or 3 days, like you don't want to have to go and hit Walmart. So what I think this marketplace would be like is like enabling people to start their own businesses around creating these experiences.
I think we need like a DoorDash for campfires. So I can be at home. I don't need to go find wood. I don't need to build the fire. It's just.
I was just thinking they just deliver the fire. hot, coming through. I am not an outdoor person, but my startup would be bringing the indoors outdoor or something like that, or bringing the outdoors indoor. I hate bugs. I constantly am getting like destroyed by mosquitoes. I like being outside, but the bugs kill it for me pretty much all the time. So I'd like to have like some business where I could enjoy the outside and there are no bugs or things like that that would cause problems for me, because like I said, I am just a mosquito feeding machine when I'm out there. My wife, not so bad. Me, you just love me. I don't know, my sweet blood, I guess.
Yeah, I've talked about the YouTube rabbit holes. I'm not sure if you guys have gone down this rabbit hole, but there's a whole theme of videos where people just show themselves camping. And usually it's stuff like they're camping in the winter somewhere and it's like snowing and it's really cold and they have like elaborate camping gear. And you see these videos and they've got like 2 million, 3 million views. Like there's interest in this stuff out there.
I think
and it's very the reason I like them is like very like your brain can go into like very low processing mode. It's like something you can watch and like truly relax.
That's the secret for Jeff. Just go outside in winter. There's no bugs.
Right. Well, I lived in Chicago for 40 years. So that was great. I winter doesn't bother me at all. Like the cold doesn't bother me. It's like, there's no bugs, nothing like that. Having moved down to the South in North Carolina, it's a little bit different story, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would rent like for me, if I was going to say, hey, you're going to go camping. I just remember like my family when we were younger, we had like this campground we'd go to in Kankakee, Illinois, for those who are familiar. And I had no desire to be outside. I just wanted to play Nintendo. So, my mom would have to shoo us outside and, unplug the games and take them away because the outside has never interested me. And I don't know if it will at some point. I think it's just not my thing. I'll go sit on the beach. I'll, sit on a boardwalk or something like that. But like, I don't know. Camping just doesn't do it for me. So that's a good way to have a doubter, I guess. I'm taking over Jim's role as the downer of leaving stuff here.
I was going to say, I'm like the positive guy in this episode. This is first.
Yeah, I probably stunned you. I was like, what the heck is going on over here? Why don't we go and wrap it up? Because I think we're up over an hour now. Definitely want to thank Matt for being on the show. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time. Any final thoughts before we close things out here?
No, I just appreciate the time here. Jeff and Jim have been a long-time listener, and I appreciate the opportunity here to talk about all things identity.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that. So for folks who are listening, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. That's the best and really only way that you guys can support us. So we certainly appreciate that. If you're going to be at, don't forget about the Identiverse regional events that are coming up here in Chicago and New York City. So I'm planning on being at the New York City one. So if you're a listener and we happen to be in the same spot, feel free to come up and say hello. Jim is usually the social butterfly and gets a lot of the, FaceTime with folks, but I enjoy it too. So come up and say hi. We're on the web, idacpodcast.com. Twitter at IDAC Podcast, Mastodon at IDAC Podcast, at infosec.exchange. We'll have links in our show notes for everything we talked about, including a link for the registration for the Identiverse regional events. Also a link to connect with Matt on LinkedIn, so that way if you got questions. And also a link for Oort, OORT.io, so you can learn more about what Matt's been working on. And we'll go ahead and leave it there. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk with everyone in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com and find us on Twitter at IDAC Podcast. See you next time on Identity at the Center.